Hello everyone, welcome to another live. I'm Alicia, one of the master trainers on the app for Stretch It, and every Saturday we get together in zeroing in flexibility topics, more demonstrations, and more importantly, an opportunity for you to ask questions in real time. Because of course you won't be able to do so on the app as you're taking class with us. If you ask me a question on the screen, I might not be able to answer unless I can hear you from there. Wouldn't that be creepy? But now you could ask me live as we're doing it. And today's topic is back and hip mobility. We'll go over the differences between mobility and flexibility once again, because they're often conflated. Also, make sure you check out our competition that is now happening on the app. And we have our front splits challenge that begins on Monday. So come on in, everybody. Get comfy. We might do some stuff together. So I do have the mat out. I have some blocks out as well. Yes, it will be saved as a reel. At the end of this live, you'll be able to see it on the Stretch It main feed, and you can rewatch from the beginning if you're unable to stay for the entire live, or you can only catch a portion of it. So that is the plan. But come on in, everybody. And as everyone is getting settled, we can cover what mobility is compared to flexibility. Flexibility refers to the range of motion, and mobility refers to what the tissues are able to do in that range of motion, meaning demonstrating some sort of control and intelligence over that range of motion. That's what mobility is. Mobility is often taught as what I would say more dynamic flexibility exercises, meaning since we're doing hip mobility, right? Let me put my glasses on because in case someone asks a question and I can't see the screen. Shoo. I think we won't be able to save just because, well, I don't know actually. That's really up to the team. If there's no save option, they probably have a reason why. Okay. For the hips, a popular exercise is what I call, let me go on this side, the hip seesaw, where you go forward and back. This might be presented as a hip mobility drill. It's not because, yes, you're stretching and you're more dynamic with your movement because you're shifting back and forth, but it's actually not challenging the joint to express force in a specific way, nor is it targeting the hips, whether you want to work on the flexion, on the extension, on the rotation. And in this position, because both hips are involved, your front hip is externally rotated and is flexing. There's a little bit of abduction there. Your back hip is extending. There might be some, well, I would say my back hip is a little turned out, but not in the same degree as my front hip is. So there's a lot going on, and with the mobility drills that we'll go over, they are designed to target specific movement capacities of that joint. So there are exercises to help mobility for rotation, flexion, extension, and abduction. Now, you can apply what are called pails and rails, the isometrics, to exercises, right? So you can, for instance, like the frog, you can apply mobility drills to this, and I would consider this like a compound movement because the hip is in all types of positions for that specific stretch. So what mobility exercise can we do for the lunge? Well, I will tighten it up a little bit and actually focus on the 90-90 position. So maybe we can work on our hip extension, what's happening on the back hip. So the stretch for this is punching the hip forward and hinging back so we can target that front hip. To make this a mobility exercise, you now want to tense the thigh and the hip where you are contracting the lengthened side of the stretch. It's almost as if you're sliding your knee forward, but of course it stays put. You ramp up your effort to a level of intensity that you cannot hold for more than 10 to 15 seconds. And the breath pattern makes it so you then go into your irradiation, and that's tensing the entire body. So the breath pattern is a lot more short and quick. So you can ramp up that effort and you keep squeezing, you keep squeezing. I like to squeeze a little bit more with every exhale that passes. A little more. A little more. I'm contracting, I'm contracting, I'm contracting. I hold where I can't hold it anymore. And now, opposite. You want to contract the opposite side of the stretch. So now tensing up the shortened side of the lunge. You ramp up to an effort that you can hold no more than 10 to 15 seconds. This is an abridged version, by the way. And then you go deeper into the stretch, right? We didn't do any of this, right? We actually applied isometrics, and that's just one part or one drill that you can rely on. It's the base drill, and there are many others that you can use, other exercises you can do in order to practice hip extension mobility. For instance, this guy is terrible. So you fold one knee under and the other leg extends behind you. For hip extension mobility, can you lift your back leg without using your hands? So right? So my hip extension mobility is quite poor, because I'm unable to lift my back leg using my hip extension. I would have to give myself more height, so it'll be easier if I'm higher off the floor, right? So I put a block between my heel and my thigh so I can now give myself an advantage. And then slowly and surely, I'll work it so that I'm all the way on the ground and can lift and lower the leg using my hip extension. The other one that we see a lot of is the hip flexion part, where you lift and lower. So the reason why, there's something in here. Yeah, the reason why I'm able to lift is because I have pretty good hip flexion mobility. You can see that my hip flexion mobility is better than my hip extension mobility from that demonstration alone. And when people attempt this, they feel a lot of cramping and seizing. That's an indication that your body does not understand what's going on. Thank you. It doesn't understand what's happening. Even though you were able to lift your leg, there were consequences for that, because since your hip flexion is unable to fully understand what it's capable of, then a lot of the other tissues then come in on the party when they're not invited, and it's like, no, you're not supposed to come. And then they come and like, wait, I'm in the wrong place, and and that's when they start cramping and where your thighs feel like they're gonna like fall off. So what do you actually have to start with? Well, the first thing is to increase your hip flexion. So if, for instance, this isn't actually my favorite way, but because I think it's easier if you're standing up and you put your leg on a block, for instance. But this is what we can mimic. So your leg is in a similar position that it was just in that front pike position. So you want to drive your heel into the ground. And again, you want to ramp up to an effort that's hard to sustain for 10 to 15 seconds. So I'm pushing, short breaths. You're radiating throughout the entire body. I'm tensing up the entire body to increase that effort. And now, as if I want to lift my heel off the floor and deepen this hip crease. So I'm actively pulling myself deeper into the stretch, now contracting the opposite side, ramping up the effort, hold, and then you deepen the stretch. That is the first part. You need the range of motion to begin with to even start moving in that way. Now, once you've introduced isometrics into those angles, this is where you can start introducing the holds where you put the leg there and you hold and you lower down, or you work on the eccentric where you work on controlling the leg, lowering. These are all drills you can rely on to master your hip flexion ability, and what will ultimately lead you to lift the leg when you're demonstrating a high degree of hip flexion. Now you might need to lean back in order to lift the leg. That's a little bit of hip. I mean, we could go on and on and on about the rotation, internal rotation. I think might have done. Did I do that last week? I can't recall. Maybe I did it for my client and I'm getting confused. Anyway, moving on. For the back is a little tricky, but we can make something happen. So, let's say you see me go up and down, right? You might say, oh, that's a back mobility exercise. No, I'm just lifting up and down. It's just a moving stretch because it's not actually addressing the strength component or potential of your spine extension, right? So, how can we challenge or contract in an extended position? Well, I would have to be in front of something, like my dresser, for instance. Don't mind my boots. So it has to be sturdy, where you lift up, hands on, and you push against. So I'm contracting now the front part of the stretch. And now the opposite side, I'm contracting the shortened side, and then I can lift higher. So that's just an example of what you can do in order to address the extension ability of your lumbar. Because you could also work on the extension ability of your thoracic and your cervical, right? So you could work your way up the spine in choosing, exercises, mobility ones, to strengthen the strength capacity, the ability to express force in these lengthened positions. You could even do this in wheel. That's a more advanced one, where you go up into wheel and you contract the lengthened side. I actually would probably, you know what, let's try it. So this is more of an advanced drill, but let me see here. Don't mind this box. If you were to place your hands behind you, right, and you want to contract the front side of the stretch, squeeze, 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 and now you want to contract the shortened part of the stretch, which is behind, and then you can move deeper into the stretch, right? So depending on the position you could actually go in will largely determine how you can apply your isometrics. But the range of motion has to be there first, so you're actually able to be in the position somewhat, right? If you could barely get into a position, that is not going to make much of a difference. Now, I know this video title said back and hip mobility, but something to consider is the shoulder, right? So this is a popular shoulder stretch where you lowering down, sitting or sinking into the wall. I have my chest away from the wall, so I could get a nice stretch there. But if you wanted, you can now apply the same isometric. So I'm pushing against the wall as if I want to drive my arm through it. I'm pushing, 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 pushing. And now as if I want to lift my arm off the wall, but I'm actually actively pulling myself deeper into the stretch, and then I sink in deeper, right? So you could also use something like that for the shoulders. And I say shoulders because a lot of times people have pretty good spine flexibility, but their shoulder flexibility and their hip flexibility gets in the way. So that this is ultra flexible, but the shoulders are not quite there, the hips are not quite there, and that's where your spine overcompensates because it's doing the job of the shoulders and the hips, and that's where injuries can occur. Especially if you wanted to do this upper back stretch, it's a lot of shoulder. And if you're trying to get that flexion, then it's probably helpful that, yes, you increase the range of motion, but you also work on strengthening that flexion as well on the shoulder. And the last exercise that we did on the floor with that lunge is helpful as well. Okay. If there's one more I want to share, it definitely has to be the frog one. I don't know if I shared this last weekend. I can't recall. But, schwink. Let's see here. Fold the edges in. This is the easiest one to teach because when you're in frog, you want to squeeze your knees into the ground as if you're trying to drive them through. You ramp up the effort, hold 10 to 15 seconds, and as if you want to pull yourself deeper into the stretch, is as if you're trying to lift your knees off the floor. So you're squeezing the outside part, ramp it up, hold, and then you stay in the stretch. And you could actually repeat that sequence 2 to 3 times. I'm only showing it once just to give you an example, but you can repeat it as many times as you like. And that one's a good one because it helps with the straddle in that it's going to mainly address the inner thighs. And if you find that the inner thighs are a point of restriction for you for your straddle, then the frog, which I just showed on the knees, is an easier stretch to get into, surprisingly, because your knees are bent. Your knees are bent. It might not be the most comfortable, but I think more generally people have an easier time going into frog than they do in the seated straddle position trying to reach forward. But let me know if you have any questions about what we went over today, again, for shoulder and hip mobility. Again, mobility is specific. It's precise. It's hard work. You can even introduce a higher level of load if you wanted. So there are so many ways to go with it. And it's important to implement because you just don't want the range of motion. You want to know what to do in that range of motion because that's what sports requires too. If you are in a sport, there are all types of like wild positions your body just happens to find itself in because you want to score points. You want to put points on the board. So you might have to contort your body in ways that are outside basic movement vocabulary, right? That are outside of neutral spine and even a round spine or an extended spine. It could be a little bit of both, right? But you need to then teach your body to express force from those contorted positions. In volleyball, where you want to spike, you got to bring your arm way back here because you got to wind it up. This is a normal range of motion for the average person. So not only do you need the range as a volleyball player, but you need the strength in that range. Is a much higher demand than what's required from normal human movement. Climbing, for instance. You need a high degree of knee flexion and hip flexion, right? If you got to climb up on something that's super high and you got to push your way up, you got to teach your hip flexion to drive weight up so you can reach to the next, whatever those are called, right? It takes more than just being able to get your knee to your armpit. So what do? People do extremely high step-ups, where you're not just doing step-ups at 90 degrees. You're doing step-ups way out here. Because why? You need to replicate the range of motion that you use to practice your climbing with. I personally think core is overrated. And I know it's a hot take. The reason I say that is because your core can be strong, but if the other parts of your body are not strong in your specific sport, then it doesn't matter how strong your core is. If you can't teach your shoulder how to be strong here, if you can't teach your spine how to be strong from here, if you can't teach your hip how to be strong from here, your core can't do anything about that. It has to be one cohesive unit. And I say that because people tend to pour a lot of emphasis on the core and they don't put enough emphasis on the movements that are priority in their certain sport. Because I understand it might not be normal to strengthen your shoulder in this range, to strengthen your hip in this range, right? I know that's not in the normal vocabulary, but ultimately, I think you have to think outside the box. Not that core isn't important, but I think core can be worked in a way that's unconventional, but can also cover a lot of ground and provide a little more security to injury. Not 100%. Nothing's 100% risk-free. But I think, again, if you challenge how you work your spine by going round, right, instead of just staying neutral, if you work your core in expressing force, not just from neutral, but why not extend at the bottom position and teach it to express force from that stretched position? Exactly. I would consider core to be shoulders, to be spine, to be hips. It's an entire unit. It's an entire unit. And the more movement, the more intelligence you can teach your body in terms of using load in the more extreme positions, right? Why not? Why limit your side bend to just here? Maybe you lift your chest even more and deepen the side bend so you can add a twist. Why stop at neutral for a deadlift where you could work on strengthening the capacity of your spinal flexion? Why not? Because even if we go out of sports, everyday life movements are weird. When you take out your groceries out from the bag, right? People usually put them on the table or the counter, right? They put them higher on a higher platform. So it's easier to get out and you could go to the cabinet, you could go to the pantry, right? But if they're on the floor, are you going to worry about being in neutral spine the entire time? No. You're going to bend this way. You're going to bend that way. And I can't stand that Pilates meme. I can't stand that Pilates meme. I know I'm on a little bit of a tangent rant right now where if you see the person pulling with the round back and the Pilates person's like this and then the person with the round back is like this, I'm like, stop that. That is not real efficient movement. If you look at a strongman competition, like I'm talking about these men and women who are strong. Okay? You think they're pulling and pushing with the neutral spine? You think they're worried about their form? No. It's because they taught their spine to be strong in different positions. I don't know about you, but pulling something round versus neutral, you're not going to be able to pull as much. I have to round a little bit. I round a little bit on my rows because I want to get a good stretch. The posture thing has held people back in becoming strong and really hitting a high potential for strength. Posture, depending on the movement discipline you're practicing, is important because depending on the movement system, yes, different postures make it more movement efficient depending on what that movement discipline is. But that's for the movement discipline. That's not real life. When you pick things up, when you clean the house, when you do chores, when you have to fix something, your back is going to round. It's going to round. So why not get strong in the positions that you find your spine in? Train it neutral, train it round, train it twisted, side lateral flexion, side bending, extended. That's how you lessen the risk of injury. Not to eliminate it completely, you just lessen the risk. Because the more movement potential you can expose your body to, there is an opportunity to adapt to those demands. And when your body encounters those movements, guess what? It adapted. It knows what to do. I'm off my soapbox. I'm off the soapbox. It's to encourage you, everyone, to just not stick to the norm. If you are in a movement discipline that requires you to be in extreme positions, get strong in those extreme positions. It's not just about range of motion. It's not. And you could also work on your range of motion while you're strength training. I know it's not the most ideal setup that, yes, you want to stretch, you want to work on your mobility, you also want to lift heavy. You could find an opportunity between your heavier lifts to maybe hold a lunge. Like on upper body day, if it's an upper body day, or if you're like on a body part split, upper, lower, even full body, and you know you're not going to work a certain body part, then in between your sets, stretch. Or pick a mobility exercise and do that and treat it as you would a strength set. And program it and make it a part of your program. Why not? Why not? It doesn't just have to be like this. And I say that because the average person doesn't have all this time to be at the gym or all this time to spend on their fitness. But whatever time they can pull out of their life to spend on their fitness, yeah, you could make it a little hybrid so you get a little bit of everything. Are you going to be on the express train to those goals? No, you're going to be on the local, which is fine. You might be on the local on a Sunday schedule or in a holiday schedule, but as long as we're still moving along, that's all that matters. So I just wanted to reserve a little bit of time if you or anyone had questions about what we covered today. And then until next time, I'll see you next Saturday. But I know sometimes if questions come through or comments come through, it may take a little bit before they show up on the feed. So just want to kind of give you guys a moment. Thank you. And if you're watching the replay, this is the end of the live, and I'm just waiting until anyone has any questions or comments to share. Hello! This is more so just general information, but if you are on the app, you can try our trial period and sign up for the beginner classes. Sciatica is tricky. Because I'm not a medical professional or a physical therapist, I won't be able to recommend anything just because it is not my place to do so. I will say generally, if you're able to at least work on your hip range of motion from a rotation point of view, and this one here, this one is like super sciatica-y. If you're able to withstand that stretch, I would hold it for as long as you can tolerate it until you can feel a little bit of relief. Typically, this is not the reason all the time, but typically, yes, it could be due to tight hips. That's an ultra simplistic diagnosis. I just want to put that out there. Ultra simplistic. Ultra simplistic. It's not going to solve the issue, or it might not even, but I just wanted to at least give you that general recommendation. Again, not from a professional standpoint, because it's not my role, but just based off someone who has experience with individuals who have experienced sciatica. Cool beans? Alrighty. Thank you everyone for taking the time to join. It's always a pleasure to see you here. Make sure you stay tuned for our next live that is scheduled to drop next Saturday, 1 p.m. Eastern. Also, make sure to check out our stretcher competition that we have now on the app, and also our front splits challenge that begins on Monday. If you want more info on that, make sure you click link in bio. And that's it. Thank you everyone for taking the time, and hopefully I will see you all again soon. Bye.